and Isabella's husband went out with her sister before her. And I was like, oh my God, Johnny, what are you doing?
Yes, she nicked her husband from her sister, which is why they're not speaking currently.
I'm Martina, and welcome to Women-Inspired Networking Conversations, the podcast. Now, if you're a woman in business who's ever been nervous about networking, felt intimidated about the salesy approach that most networking events have, then this is for you. This podcast is all about real conversations. No fluff, no pressure, just real conversations with other women in business who understand the journey. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy. Grab a coffee and let's chat. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm with Ruth from Ruth Leigh Writes. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Martina.
Thank you so much for speaking to me today. I've been really excited about this because you're hilarious anyway, in a good way, obviously.
Obviously, funny in a good way.
But I really wanted to chat to you about your journey. You've had a really big journey to get to where you are now. So you tell us a little bit about your journey and your business.
Of course, thank you very much. Well, it started off with me reading and writing a lot as a child. We didn't have a television, friends weren't particularly encouraged, so books were my thing. So I spent a huge amount of time reading voraciously, writing little stories, making up worlds. And in primary school, that was my top subject. I was superb at it. Because I was a little child, I thought dreams came true. And if you wanted to be a writer, that's what would happen to you. That didn't happen to me for various reasons. So I spent much of my career doing jobs that were fine. I liked them. I made lots of friends. I learnt huge amounts, but they weren't the dream. And I'd just given up on that. I thought, you're not going to get your dream, Ruth. Don't be silly. So I carried on reading loads, but I didn't write. And then in 2008, when I was expecting baby number 3, I somehow managed to get myself a job as a freelance journalist. So I was writing for a charity that taught me everything you need to know about business writing, being engaging, having a hook, writing for the audience that you want, all that kind of thing. So I did that for a long time and I was getting more and more clients, really enjoying it, but it still wasn't the creative dream that I wanted. It was great, but it wasn't me making up stories, which is how I'd started out. So that didn't happen until lockdown in 2020, when I wrote a funny blog about a dreadfully annoying woman called Isabella M. Smooge, as in Bruges, which spells out I am smug. And it kind of went a bit mad. She was based on all the women on Instagram who were annoying the heck fire out of me because I was stuck at home with 3 children who did not want to do their online homework. My roots were starting to show through, and as an Essex girl, this was shocking to me. The garden was a mess, weeds everywhere, piles of towels, dust, and all these women were like, oh yeah, I'm just baking some sourdough bread, making memories, doing Joe Wicks, my life's so fabulous. And I was thinking naughty words in my head, even though I'm a good and moral woman. And so I made up this frightful woman, wrote this blog partly in her voice, which was very annoying, and partly in mine. And it just went really well. And people kept saying, oh, you should write a novel. I was like, don't think so. Did another blog, mentioned her again. Bosh, literary agent, got in touch, got me a book deal. So that's the basic story of my writing career, which has now been going on, since 2008 for freelance and to 2020. Fiction. You
make it sound so easy. Like, it hasn't been that easy.
Nothing has been easy in my life. Never, ever. I'm just quite good at talking about it. As we're speaking, I've just finished a week of spending my time in schools talking almost endlessly about myself, which has gone down surprisingly well. It's careers time at the moment. So I did East Bergholt High a couple of weeks ago, their year 9s, and I've just done 3 days straight at Farlingay for their year 10 careers. And that involves inspiring, angry, hormonal 14 and 15-year-olds. So you've got to have a great story. And then my absolute favourite, I simply love people that age. They're fab. So that's why it was so slick, because I've been telling that story non-stop this week and last week.
Do you say to them when you go to these career days, how can you inspire an angry 14?
Not all angry, but they're hormonal and it's hot and it's the end of term and they've all had enough. I think, I say, basically, I'm completely different to everybody else. I'm self-employed, I'm a creative, and I hated high school. And I always say to them right at the beginning, I've made an effort for you. I'm wearing a really nice outfit. I've had my hair done. I've painted my nails. I've put on all my sparkly writer accessories. And I'm standing here with all of these books. And a lot of their faces fall, poor little lambs, when they come in. They think, oh, no, another middle-aged woman banging on about books. Great. So I'm already in a room where they don't want to listen to what I've got to say to them, which is great because I simply love a challenge. And I just tell them the truth. I say I could pretend to be fabulous and wonderful and having a great life, but that's not the truth. Let's go back. And I tell them about my childhood a little bit. And I talk about how much I hated high school and what a loser I thought I was and how no one ever thought I would make it. And I talk a bit about the journey. I tell them funny stories. We do some interactive stuff because I'm being authentic and saying, listen, if you're that person, if you think I'm never going to make it in life, I hate school, I'm not going to get great GCSEs, I say I'm hardly the poster girl, for doing well in your exams because I didn't. And I think if you just tell them the truth and make a few jokes and make it interesting, you've got them.
Yeah, definitely. I think they'd relate to you a lot as well because everyone feels like they're not good enough at high school. Everyone feels imposter syndrome like we do now in our business, let alone when you're in high school surrounded by all this peer pressure of you have to perform, but I don't really know what I want to do. Yeah, it's a really hard audience.
Yeah, I feel for them. And I think what really touches my heart every year, and particularly so this year actually, is that I get home and there's always a little handful of messages on Instagram and TikTok just saying the loveliest things, which just touches me so much. No offense at all, but if a 14 or a 15-year-old person takes the time to get in touch with me, they're not doing it to be polite. They're doing it because they really feel it. I even had a parent this year get in touch saying that their young person was really inspired by what I said. And I always say the same thing to them. The most annoying life lesson I've ever learned is that it's not the nice stuff and the easy stuff that makes you the person you are. It's the challenges and the trauma and the pain and the obstacles you overcome. That's what does it. I sometimes wish I had had a lovely, easy life, but I say that to them and they say, well, no, you wouldn't be you then, would you, miss? And you wouldn't have written all those books. And I say, no, I wouldn't. So it's just the way life's worked out, I suppose.
So you've just said, written all these books.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a bit about your books.
Well, all these books?
Yeah, all these books.
How long have we got?
I can edit it out, it's fine.
Thanks. Right, okay. Well, I'm about to publish book number 8, although I've got a 9th up my sleeve as well, which is finished. So I've published 4 books in the Isabella M. Smooge series, each of which covers a calendar year in Isabella's life when she leaves London, moves to Suffolk and discovers that country life is not quite as she imagined it would be. Number 5 comes out next month. I have written A Great Deal of Ingenuity, which is a collection of short stories based on minor characters in Pride and Prejudice, book of poetry, and a collection of blogs.
Wow. So collection of blogs, what kind of blogs?
Such a mixture. That's how my fiction career started. So I got asked to contribute to this daily blog. It's like a national writers group that I'm part of, and I got the 7th of the month. And I started off in the November of 2019, I think. I looked at everyone else and I was a bit in awe because lots of them had published and I hadn't. And I thought, okay, I can be the funny one. So I just went funny because they don't like you making jokes in freelance. It's frowned upon. So my natural bubbling sense of fun had been somewhat, kept back in my writing career. So I just went for it, all guns blazing. Everyone thought it was hilarious. So I wrote about my writing journey. There's lots of feminist ranting, quite a lot of things like book reviews, TV reviews, writing about lockdown, funny stuff, sad stuff, poignant stuff. I suffer from CAD, which is courgette anxiety disorder. And that's my husband planting way too many courgette plants. Every year he does this. And every year I say, why are you doing this? And he says, just in case. And I say, in case of what? An international courgette shortage. This is never going to happen. So funny stuff about vegetables, quite a lot about lockdown because he naturally built a polytunnel, which was the man equivalent of baking sourdough bread and doing Joe Wicks every morning. So a lot of that sort of stuff. We would call it a smorgasbord, I would suggest, of short pieces.
So I'm actually reading the first book and I am actually really embarrassed to say I've had the book for how many years now? When did I meet you?
Oh, yes, I suppose it was wasn't it?
Yeah, we did a craft fair in
We did.
And literally, I bought the book there and then I read the first chapter in front of you, like at the craft fair, because it was quite quiet. And then life took over. I got busy. I had another baby. I'm trying to run businesses, slap wrists. I just haven't got there. So I'm reading it again and I must be on chapter 4 or 5. And I remember when I read it the first time in front of you and I just couldn't hold back laughing. It was so hilarious. I was reading it and everyone was like, what are you reading? I was like, her book. I'm reading her book. You sat opposite me. It's hilarious. It's just so real. It's like Instagram life versus reality, isn't it? Like, And it's so funny. I've got to the point where it's got really juicy, and Isabella's husband went out with her sister before her. And I was like, oh my God, Johnny, what are you doing?
Yes, she nicked her husband from the sister, which is why they're not speaking currently.
And it all unravels. And I'm just,
Yes.
It's like my guilty pleasure, like reading. Because whenever I do read, because I've always been very business focused, all the books that I've ever read have really been personal development books. But yours is the first one I've really read for me, I feel.
Thank you. That's very encouraging.
I just love it. I just think it's hilarious. So I will get on it and I will read the rest of the book.
It's not like you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs on the shopping channel, is it?
I just want to say, I love the book and I do rave about it to everyone.
And
good. The people at the networking groups love the book as well, though, don't they?
Yeah, they do seem to. I've been really encouraged by that. I've picked up quite a few super fans from Win. So I go to Felixstowe and Woodbridge, and in both groups, people have been saying, either they say I don't really read like yourself, or they say, I haven't really got time to read. Once they've had me giving it all the chat, they quite often give this sort of special smile that people do when they've met me the first time. And they say, do you know what? Yeah, go on, I'll buy it. And then I get a really nice message from them going, okay, I'm hooked. Can I get the next one, please? Because it's easy reading, but it's not girly flim flam. There's a bit of oomph to it. It's not just for women. I have a lot of man readers too. But because your networking group is women only, there's so much stuff that we get in there. Dreadful mothers on the playground, nits, PTA drama, husbands who aren't perhaps quite as they appear, her awful gin-swigging, chain-smoking mother who puts her down all the time. All of that stuff, we all get that stuff. And I've been really chuffed, to make new friends through the networking, but also to get quite a devoted band of super fans, which is great. It's what we want.
I love that. Because that's what it's all about for me. It's about bringing people to you who are your people and spreading your network and selling your book to someone that's there, but them then telling someone else about you. And now you're actually part of Gia's book club. How do I say it?
Gaia, I think. Gaia's book club. Yeah.
So I've actually been part of that book club before, and you get sent one book every single month, and you were the book, was it for this month?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's incredible. And that's a big women's network as well.
Yeah, and that all came about because of me meeting Paige Milmead at the networking, and she introduced me to Francesca Catlow, who is quite a well-known novelist. And last time, I sat myself down with a giant box and sat there furiously signing books.
They were literally piled up high. It was crazy. So you've been coming to the Woodbridge event really since it started last September. Do you want to tell us how you find the events and just your take really on the events?
Well, I think what I really like about them is that it's the perfect blend for me of informal and well organised, because when people say informal networking can mean nobody really knows what they're doing. There's no structure and everyone's just wandering around exchanging business cards and talking over each other, which is not networking. I could do that for free at home. So we don't want that. But equally, I'm not a fan at all of strict prescriptive networking where you get locked out, or if you don't turn up, you get stern emails and all that kind of thing. I don't like that either. So I like it because if I've got time to come, I can. Also, I know I'm going to meet interesting people there and I'm going to develop relationships. And I like the fact that there is a structure, but you don't always stick to it. So last month, there weren't so many ladies, so you went with a completely different form of networking, which really works for me. So no, there'll be a speaker. You will make sure that we all move round. We've all got stickers and names, and it's in a really lovely, relaxed setting. So it really works for me. I'm very keen on it, I have to say.
I do feel like I needed to create something that was really relaxed, but like you say, not so relaxed that you just turn up and then you don't make any connections, and the really nervous people just stand in this corner of the room on their phone scrolling and then they haven't spoken to anyone. So I like to make it really easy for people to be able to make connections, and I want them to leave with connections, because I want you to come and sell a book or meet Paige where that's going to lead to something else, leave that event and go, oh my gosh, I got so much out of that. I want to go back again.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what it's about. There should be a place for even the most nervous person to network.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think there's enough nice people in the room that if someone is obviously really nervous and it's their first time, at least one person will take them under their wing. I've seen that happen lots of times. And I also, as you know, I also co-run a networking group in Woodbridge myself, which is, again, formal, but really well organised. That's the only two I do. I don't do any other kind of networking at all. And I wouldn't either. I found the ones I like. Be encouraged by that.
There are lots of different networking groups out there, and I am never the person to say only do my networking. All of them are so different, and they all really suit a different kind of person as well. Some people like the whole strict stand up and say what you do. There are so many different types, but none of it's bad. It's just done slightly differently. And I like to think that my networking is very intentional. Everything is for a reason.
Yeah.
So you strike me as a really confident person, because when you come to the networking events, you have such a presence. We've had you as guest speaker quite a few times at various different locations, talking about something slightly different each time. But you always get us to really think outside of the box. When we were in Felixstowe, for example, I had both the kids, so I was a bit of a nightmare on that session. Do you want to explain what you got everyone to do? It was very, very interactive.
Yes, that's right. It was, wasn't it? I told them a story about something that happened to me when I was at Helmingham Hall. I was sitting in my gazebo and a scene unfolded in front of me. And I never found out why it was that this lady was shouting at her snow-haired, sweet old lady mother. There was something about a basket of lavender. They sort of faded out, and I didn't chase them round Helmingham listening to their conversation, so I didn't know the end of the story. And it's a great exercise to get people thinking. So I told everyone the story, the bit I know, and then said, right, 5 minutes, tell me why the daughter was so angry with the mother. Go. And I've used that exercise so many times in so many different settings for different people. And it's always the same. No one ever hesitates, because I'm not saying in a teachy voice, oh, we're going to do a writing exercise now, because that would be really boring. So everyone immediately, normally, starts talking in their groups. And everyone did, apart from one lady who I just met. And she just sat there staring at me. And I smiled encouragingly. And she said something like, I can't think of anything to write because I've never heard anyone speak the way you do. And I just want to hear you carry on talking forever. And I was like, wow. Gosh, thanks. I didn't really know what to say because I was so complimented, so amazed by what she said. So she did come up with something with her partner in crime, but I was very touched.
It was really, really good. And it was really entertaining. All the things that everyone was coming up with, they'd all finished the story for you. This is all great content for you. Like, you could use this.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're getting us to finish your stories for you.
Yes, I am and I'm not. With the lavender lady, I tend not to use that as content, but then you just never know when it's going to strike. So sometimes I'll just be at an event and someone will say something, or a look will pass over their face, or I don't know, they might be talking about something, nothing private, because I would never do that. But because of the kind of insane writing brain I've got, it's never off. It's amazing what can fire off a story idea or fire off some dialogue. So I have finished writing number 5, the final novel in the Izzy series. And this time round, because, I kind of know what I'm doing now, I've been doing it for a while, it wasn't too hard to write. It just seemed to come out. I mean, obviously I had to work, but it did just come out. And looking back over it, I was like, oh, okay, I wonder where that came from. And then I think, oh, that's because of that woman I once met and she said something and that made me think that. It's a dangerous business hanging around with a writer. It really is, because you never know what's going in and what then indeed might come out again in a slightly different form. So yeah, I mean, networking is great for content in that you're meeting people you don't know. You might have a fantastic conversation with someone and they mention something and I might say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Do you mind if I use that? And they say, yeah, it's fine.
I think it is about the people that you meet, but it's not always about sales. And I know you do sell a lot of books, really, but it isn't always about sales. I think it's about people connecting and meeting someone new, and it's about their network. I think that's the power of networking. That's how it spreads. You just want to be that go-to writer that everyone recommends to their friends.
Exactly that. That's exactly it. I never look on the networking as a selling opportunity, but I do bring the books along just because, it shows what I do. If people say, oh, Ruth, you've got to read her stuff. That's what it's all about for me. I want to be the one. I want to be known. I want people to talk about me and say, I nearly wet myself reading this scene. You've got to give it a go. And I think as well, I think this is quite important because we are all working women and we all struggle with imposter syndrome and exhaustion and the mother load and all of that stuff and all of the stuff we don't talk about that goes on behind the scenes. Who doesn't just want to sit down with a cup of tea or a glass of wine and just escape into a world that isn't their own? I do. I've spent my whole life escaping from things that weren't going well into the world of books. And isn't it strange that that anxious little girl has turned into me, someone who is doing the same for other people, writing stuff that helps people to get away from things that are not great sometimes. Although you don't have to be traumatized to read my books. Let me make that absolutely clear. If everything's marvellous in your life, you can still read them.
I think everyone knows Isabella Smooge. I think that everyone's got someone. Can I just ask you, is there any parts of her that is you?
That's a really great question. When I made her up, I wasn't thinking of myself at all. I deliberately made her the exact opposite of me. Rich, posh, skinny, enormously successful, pots of cash, So none of those things are anything you could accuse me of at the present time. So I just made her up in my mind. I didn't even do any research on influencers, interestingly, and I should have done it looking back, but I didn't. This person just seemed to exist in my head. So I wrote her and people kept saying, oh, is she based on you? And I kept saying, no, obviously not. And the first book went out. And I got a call from a really good friend of mine. She and I had our first babies at the same time. And we went to antenatal classes and all that kind of thing. We became close friends, bonding over these babies. And she said, Ruth, I've worked out who Isabella is. I said, really? Do you think she is someone? She went, oh, yes. She said, do you remember when we used to turn up at the toddler group and we'd had about 5 minutes sleep and you'd always have sick down your back and I'd be crying and we'd be wearing paper pants and we'd have pads in our bras and there would always be a woman who would come sashaying in holding this baby and she wasn't crying and she didn't have sick down her back and she'd immediately lost the baby weight. In fact, she'd snapped back into shape. How I hate that phrase. And if you got into conversation with her, her makeup was on, her hair was done, she, wore nice clothes. And she'd say things like, no, whatever he was called, Oscar has been sleeping through the night since he was a week old. And you think, what the actual yes, Martina is currently making 2 fists, exactly that. And then a little bit later on, of course, Oscar would be the first baby to sit up, to crawl, to roll over, to get a degree from Oxford, all of that. So that's who this person was. But then, weirdly enough, the more I write her, the more she is not me, but certainly elements of me. I mean, I can see it really clearly. And a lot of my most devoted readers do say to me, good Lord, Ruth, she's getting more and more like you. She is a champion deflector, just like I am. So she would say, oh, no, I'm absolutely fine. That stuff happened when I was a child. It didn't affect me. No, don't you worry. Of course I can do X, Y, and Z, which is exactly what I do. But I suppose you can't keep on writing a character without putting some element of yourself into her. So, yes and no would be the answer to your question.
I love that. Well, where I've got to in the book, she has got a little bit softer and all of a sudden she's kind of become very vulnerable, which in the first couple of chapters you would never think. So I'm excited to see how she changes and all the plots and twists.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
Okay, so when it comes to networking, just to round up, what would you say to someone that's sitting on the sidelines, who doesn't really understand networking or hasn't been brave enough to come along? What would you say to that person?
I used to be you. If you meet me now, you think, oh, look at her, Mrs. Confident, with all her books and her book awards and her lovely dresses and her sparkly ring. But I can remember the very first networking I went to when I was doing a different business. I was terrified. I turned up in this room, it's full of men in suits and women in really flash clothes, and I did not belong. I felt like an outsider. I thought I was a complete loser. I thought, why am I doing this? And I was going to call it a day. It was month 6 and I was going to call it a day. And you had to stand up and you had to say something. And I was okay with that, even though I wasn't that confident, but I was trying to be like everybody else because they were all coming out and using all this corporate language, which wasn't my thing at all. So I just copied them. And, that didn't work because I wasn't being myself. And then I shared with someone, another woman, I said, I think I'm going to call it a day, actually. And she said, really? I said, yeah, I don't really fit in here. And then she said something and we were joking about qualifications. And I said, oh, have you heard about my qualification, JNP? I've got letters after my name. She said, JNP, what's that? I said, jolly nice person. And she fell about laughing. And somewhere in the recesses of my brain, a bell rang. I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I could be the funny one. So I used my sense of humour and my bubbly personality, which I had been pushing down, and I became the funny one. And after that, networking was much easier because I was being myself. When you get to these places, if you are a shy person or an introvert, which I used to be, I hated hanging out with other people, I didn't like speaking, go along anyway and find someone really nice and kind and stick with them. And you'd be surprised how much you change. I have changed out of all recognition from that shy, nervous person who hated networking. But I only changed because I kept going and I learned lots of stuff and I learned what you don't do.
Yeah, I think it is trial and error, isn't it? And everyone's different. Something that works for me might not work for you. It's about trying all the different types of networking. It's about being yourself 100%.
Yeah.
Because if you're comfortable in yourself, you come across as comfortable and you come across as confident. Whereas when you're trying to be something you're not, it's a little bit awkward and salesy. So yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was lots of fun.
And I will speak to all of our listeners next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for being here and listening with us today. If you're loving the podcast and want to find out more about our Women Inspired Network events, then find out more on www.womeninspirednetwork.com/events. Or you can connect with us on Facebook under Women Inspired Network, or follow along on Instagram under women_inspired_network. And of course, subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss an episode. I'll see you next week for another honest conversation.